Just ahead on American Black Journal, it's one of the most comprehensive projects ever undertaken to assess blighted properties in Detroit. We'll talk about the findings of the Detroit Blight Removal Task Force. Plus, 98-year-old activist Lee Boggs is the subject of a new PBS documentary. We'll have a preview and learn about a new Detroit school that bears her name. Stay with us.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Recently, the Detroit Blight Removal Task Force revealed its plan and recommendations to get rid of blight in the city of Detroit. The comprehensive plan is titled "Every Neighborhood Has a Future," and it doesn't include blight. It's based on 8 months of research and data collection, which included surveying every structure and vacant lot in the city. We're talking about a 139 square mile area with 380,000 real estate parcels. Based on its findings, the task force believes that all blight in Detroit can be removed in 5 years or less. Joining us today is the co-chair of the Detroit Blight Removal Task Force, Dr. Glenda Price, president of the Detroit Public Schools Foundation. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Just the numbers in that little intro there are mind-scrambling. 139 square miles, 380,000 real estate parcels. Everybody who's been to Detroit knows the widespread blight we have, and yet you guys think 5 years and we can get rid of all of it.
Absolutely, because we have recommended a strategy whereby there will be multiple phases to this project, and there will be a concentration of removal in particular geographies, so that if you are demolishing certain properties, if you're renovating others, if you are cleaning up blighted vacant lots, you're going to be able to tackle a community and get it done in a very efficient way.
Yeah, 5 years though is a pretty tight window. It's taken us 30 years, right, to get to this point.
But we've never had this level of determination or a plan like this before.
Yeah.
And cooperation. Yeah. Many people have come to the table to ensure that this is going to happen.
Yeah. Talk about what it took to get all of this data together and put it in the book. I know that there were hundreds and hundreds of people involved in going out and actually looking at all these.
Absolutely. When we began our work as a task force, we realized that there were lots of estimates about the level of blight within the community, and it became very clear to us early on that we really needed some hard data. And so the decision was made to contract with Loveland Technologies and Data Driven Detroit to do a parcel by parcel survey of the city, so that every single parcel was surveyed, and there were more than 150 surveyors that were on the street with their little cameras and pads, and they looked at the condition of every structure and every lot. And when I say the condition, of course, this was an external survey. It was not internal.
They didn't go inside.
They did not go inside, but we now have a database that tells us where the blight is, what is the extent of that blight, and around that you could in fact then develop the plan.
Right. And so the plan talks about targeted sort of areas where
the plan does not talk about specific targeted areas. What the plan does is to help those who are going to be making those decisions about which houses to come down. The plan makes recommendations for strategy, for how to approach the decision making, to look at the tipping point neighborhoods as just one example. And a tipping point neighborhood is a neighborhood where there are blight indicators, and you want that neighborhood not to tip completely into a blighted structure, so you might want to invest there first to indeed revitalize a community.
Yeah. The title of the report, "Every Neighborhood Has a Future, and it doesn't include Blight." That's sort of a play on a slogan that the mayor was using last year during the campaign, and I used to sort of snipe at him a little bit when he said that. I felt like it's a little bit like overpromising. Every neighborhood has a future, but I've come to sort of think of that differently. That he's not saying that every neighborhood has the same future, but that it doesn't. And here it's saying it doesn't include Blight.
And it doesn't include Blight. And once the Blight is removed, then that neighborhood has the ability to determine in a variety of ways how it will be revitalized.
Right.
In some neighborhoods, there may in fact be new housing. In other neighborhoods, it's going to be green space. And in other neighborhoods, there might be light industry. And our recommendation is that a system of input by individuals who remain in those neighborhoods, that they be brought into the process to talk about what is their own future.
What do they want to do for themselves and where they live. And removing the Blight is really the first
That's
step
the first step
to doing that.
That's exactly right.
I have spent some time recently over in the area that John Hance is working on
the
over
east
on the east side. And they're just planting trees right now, but they're also removing all of the brush and the trash and all of these things off the lots. And when you take all that stuff away, it's amazing what you find in these neighborhoods.
Totally different impression and image of not only the current neighborhood, but what is possible.
But what could be there.
What could be there.
Yeah.
You can think differently about it. And I jokingly said to someone, we have a lot of people who take trips to Ohio to go to the amusement park. Wouldn't it be fun if we had one? We have plenty of space right here in Detroit to build our own amusement park.
Right.
I mean, it was a joke when I said it, but I think that what that says is that everything is on the table.
Yeah.
There are all the possibilities.
We can do anything.
We can do anything.
Yeah, but we have to start.
We have to start by removing the burnt out structures, cleaning the lots that have been dumped on. And once that happens, the other thing we have to do is make certain that the neighbors in those neighborhoods take control of their neighborhoods and prevent the dumping that has occurred in the past, and no longer allow individuals to come into their community and to recreate the kind of blight that has happened in the past.
Right. Maintenance of this effort would seem to be a big part of it. You can tear down a house and you do that once and it's gone.
Right.
But taking care of a lot so that it doesn't become overgrown or that people don't dump there, that's sort of an ongoing and constant
It is,
challenge.
and one of our recommendations is that there would be a planting of appropriate grasses and greenery that would diminish or minimize the overgrowth that could indeed take place, but the dumping is a people issue, not a natural issue.
No, that's right. That's right. How does this report dovetail with Detroit Future City, which is the big sort of blueprint that we have for the city's future?
That blueprint is around what I define as the second phase. What next? What comes into those neighborhoods once the blight is removed? And so in our work, we indeed looked at the Future City Plan and realized there's absolutely no conflict. What we believe we're doing, again, is phase one, removing the blight so that the Future City Plan can in fact be implemented.
To take root in some of the neighborhoods. If I live in Brightmoor, if I live in Southwest, how soon would I notice the result of this plan taking place?
Well, I can't speak to those specific neighborhoods, but I can say that the work of demolition and deconstruction and the removal of debris in lots has already begun, and people in some neighborhoods are already seeing.
Are noticing.
They are already noticing, and people are thanking us in our work, and of course we take the thanks, though we didn't do it. But going forward, it's the Detroit Land Bank that is going to be making those decisions about where and how fast. And of course, how fast will depend to some degree on financing.
Right.
The first 3 years of financing, we believe, is secured. That's pending, of course, the bankruptcy.
The bankruptcy. But what
Yes.
are we talking about? Price tag, general ballpark?
For the total,
total.
$850 million.
Wow. So almost $1 billion.
Almost
to
$1
clean
billion.
up all the stuff that we've got.
And if you put into that then the large industrial sites, it's over $1 billion.
Right. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you. We've got about 30 seconds left, but this is mostly about residential.
This is mostly about residential and small commercial.
Okay.
You know.
But we've got a big problem in Detroit with industrial, large and small,
exactly.
all over the city.
And
that's a whole different issue.
That is a different issue, and thankfully the city is beginning to address it.
Yeah.
But this particular report does not deal with that.
Okay. Well, this is great work. It's about time we got to this
Yes.
point, right?
Doesn't it make you feel good?
It does. It
We're
feels
moving
like
forward.
We're headed in the right direction. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Just ahead on American Black Journal, for 7 decades, Grace Lee Boggs has been a leader in the civil rights, labor, and Black Power movements. Now she's the inspiration for a documentary and a new Detroit school. That's next, right after this look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1996, Marie Farrell Donaldson, the first Black woman in Michigan to become a certified public accountant, died at the age of 48. In 1975, at the age of 36, Dr. Arthur Jefferson became the first Black man to serve as Detroit Public School superintendent. And in 1922, Damon J. Keith was born in Detroit. He became a celebrated U.S. Court of Appeals judge. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
The Michigan Women's Hall of Fame in Lansing is currently honoring 6 women who displayed tremendous courage during the civil rights movement. Longtime Detroit activist, writer, and philosopher Grace Lee Boggs is one of the inductees. She's also the subject of a PBS documentary that airs on this station tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. It's called American Revolutionary: The Evolution of Grace Lee Boggs. Here's a sneak peek.
I feel so sorry for people who are not living in Detroit. People are always striving for size, to be a giant. And this is a symbol of how giants fall. Keep recognizing that reality is changing and that your ideas have to change. Don't get stuck in old ideas.
Grace has made more contributions to the Black struggle than most Black people have.
How did you become a philosopher?
I'll just go back 70 years. I'm not sure why I am who I am. I think it does have something to do with the fact that I was born female and born Chinese.
Folks didn't really think about Grace as a Chinese American. She was Grace. You know, she was just one of us.
I think the light bulb goes on very often in conversations that people have, and we don't pay attention to it.
Talk is cheap.
I find it very, very difficult to take. I want to tell you honestly, their talk was not cheap.
Oh, God, yeah, she made all kinds of people cry. Myself included.
Grace, how would you describe where we stand now?
One of the difficulties when you're coming out of oppression is that you get a concept of the Messiah. You have to get to that point that we are the leaders we've been looking for. We are the children of Martin and Malcolm. I don't know what the next American Revolution is going to be like, but you might be able to imagine it if your imagination were rich enough.
Last year, a charter school named after Grace and her late husband, James, opened on Detroit's east side. Students at the Boggs School are taught to become critical thinkers who are committed to making Detroit a better place. Two members of the school's board of directors are here today. Please welcome board president Dr. Loomis Elaire, who is director of the Gear Up program at the University of Michigan, and board member Alice Jennings, a civil rights lawyer and longtime friend of Grace and Jimmy Boggs. Thank you for joining us on the Black Journal. So this school sounds like a great place, and a place that is going to maybe produce the next Grace Lee Boggs, right? Is that the point?
That is the point of the school.
Yeah.
With the students, so first of all, I have to say that the students are beautiful. They are curious, imaginative, and they come to us that way at the school.
Yeah.
And so we really do believe in that the students who come to our school, we're building the leaders who can lead Detroit into the future that we all know Detroit can be.
Yeah.
So we're very excited about the students who come to us. They come from different parts of the city, and 50% of the students come from the neighborhood that we're in currently.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
And the exact neighborhood is where?
On the east side of Detroit,
Yeah.
so near Gratiot and Mack.
Gratiot and Mack.
Yep.
Okay. Well, a pretty hard hit part of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a pretty hard hit of the city. I'm assuming you're talking about in terms of economics.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
I mean, it's a part of the city where someone like Grace Lee Boggs, that her work would have been centered. Correct?
Right, and
Yeah.
that's part of the reason for the location of the school.
Yeah.
When we looked at schools, we looked at the east side of Detroit. We initially looked at Island View Village, and we were doing work there,
Yeah.
but we couldn't find a building. But we wanted to make sure we looked at a space where there wasn't many schools very close in the area doing some of the work that we were doing. So we were very intentional about being on the east side of Detroit and being in a community that didn't have as many resources as other places.
Yeah. Sure. I think if you say the name Grace Lee Boggs around Detroit, most people, I think, have some idea of who you're talking about, but I often think that they don't really know what the work she did and continues to do means, and sort of, I think there's a lot of context missing from her.
Yes, Grace Lee Boggs, as well as her late husband, James Boggs, for Grace, she's been involved now for 60 years. Right. Tomorrow, she turns 99 years young.
Is that right?
Because she's still with us and still on the case. So Grace has historically in Detroit meant a lot to the African American community and all people, really. Starting in the 1950s, Grace was involved with some of the leading civil rights thinkers of our time, Reverend Clegg, Reverend Franklin. She was involved with the 1963 March down Woodward, where Martin Luther King gave the first
game.
First I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
She was an organizer there. She is organized around education, violence with Save Our Sons and Daughters. She and Jimmy helped create Detroit Summer, which became similar to the civil rights movement, where we're now celebrating 50 years of Freedom Summer.
Freedom Summer, sure.
Well, we had Detroit Summer for many years, and that brought young people in from all over the country.
Right.
Julia Putnam is the first person who signed up for Detroit Summer.
Is that right?
And she is now the principal of the school.
Oh, of the school.
Yes. So there's
wow.
a direct connection with the nurturement that occurred with Grace's leadership and Jimmy's leadership. And so many of the folks with the school have had connections.
Yeah. You know, I wonder at the school, what kinds of things are you talking to the kids about that are civil rights issues today? I mean, it's very different now than it was 30 or 40 years ago, but of course there are still very big issues. What are the kind of things that that kids today might think of as civil rights challenges?
So I think one of the things to remember is that the school is K4 now.
Okay.
It'll be K5
So very little
next
kids.
year. So very little kids.
Right.
So talking about social justice and social rights issues may sound very different than it would sound with adults or even adolescents.
Sure.
I think one of the things I think about at the school at this level, we speak to kids about what it means to connect with one another.
Yeah.
So building community amongst the students. So I'm not necessarily speaking directly about social justice and social rights issues, more so introducing them to the notion of thinking about what is our role and responsibility to one another and to community.
Sure.
The curriculum for the school is place-based education. So it says that all of the learning for all of the disciplines from mathematics to science and ecology is connected to learning about the community and figuring out how can we contribute to the community. For example, students can walk around the community and do an asset map. It's something that they've been working towards. So you go around the community and you basically, as you learn about maps and cartography, you are learning about what are the different places and different types of institutions we have in our community. That later on sets up a discussion of what other things would you like to see?
What should we have?
What should we have, and how do we get those things? So it's not necessarily speaking about social justice and social activist rights issues from a standpoint of deficit, but from them really thinking creatively and critically around what is possible.
Right, right. And building that individual character at that young age, which gives them that self confidence and identity that makes you want to stand up for yourself and for others.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the principles of the Boggs School is that we are solutionaries. In fact, the T-shirts for the Boggs Center has that on the back of it. And so, for instance, a young child who sees inequality walking through the neighborhood, some homes are nice. There are actually homes in the neighborhood that are completely blighted.
Sure.
There are homes where people live that don't have water, that maybe don't have heat. Being involved in knowing that, those children bring that to the classroom. And they want to have discussions like, my cousin's water got cut off, and they're living with us. Why is that?
Right.
Why can't people have water? Why isn't it a human right? And so this is, even though they're young, they are very astute.
Right?
They see, in fact, they may see inequality a lot faster than older folks. So I think that is part of the mission, but also we know that they won't be Jimmy Boggs or Lee Boggs. They'll be what their times, their community require of them to move it forward.
Right.
And the term is revolutionary humanism. And Grace's position, when you think of revolution, sometimes you think of destruction. But in the terms of revolutionary humanism or revolutionary love of community, the beloved community, all of these concepts are kind of seeped into the framework there at the Boggs School.
Right. In the film clip we watched, you saw Grace Boggs talking about the election of President Obama in 2009, and how we always seem to be looking for some sort of I think the word she used was messiah, and that increasingly we really need to be the captains, the leaders of our own movement. That's got to be a very difficult thing to sort of come to terms with little kids, right?
You know what, I would have to say I'm not sure. Little kids' minds, I would think that it would be easier for little kids to come to terms with it. I think the notion that there can only be one may something that is taught to kids more so than something that they come up with on their own.
Sure.
And I think when you think about building community, and even when they look at the leaders of the school, the founders of the school, the principal, the executive director, the community director, they are being brought up in a tradition that's all about there's not just one, but that we all have responsibility.
That we all have a role.
We share it collectively, and when you see them interact with one another, you see them support one another. There's no diffusive responsibility. If there's one student that needs attention, there's several students that run over. Peter Putnam, Julia's husband, tells me the story of they were out doing some activities with the kids that were playing. One of the kids tripped and fell, and then all of a sudden there was just a rush of bodies over to this one child. He's like, are they running over? What are they doing? And then they all were helping this one child up. So they're being brought up in that tradition that Grace has bred in her work, that it's about all community members showing up together.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
you said she's going to be 99.
99.
That's
absolutely.
a remarkable run for anybody. What would you say would you say the school is the most important part of her legacy around town?
Grace and I have had discussions about this, and it's funny you should raise this, but just 2 weeks ago I said, Grace, the legacy of James and Grace Lee Boggs may very well be over on Mitchell Street.
Yeah.
Because the seeding that's happening there, the love that's being given and grown,
right,
is going to manifest itself maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And no matter what they do, even if they go to another city.
Sure.
We have Grace Lee Boggs thinkers all over the
All
world
over the world,
now.
right, yeah.
And so these children are really, not that it's a laboratory or anything
Sure.
like that, but it certainly is a place,
Yeah.
a play space where children
Yeah.
can learn to love other people and to care about their community.
Right. Well, that's a great thought to leave the interview on. Thank you guys for being here, and
Thank
good
you.
luck at the school.
Thanks.
That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time on American Black Journal.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.